White, and I'm locked in.
I'm Stephen Mowry, and I'm locked in.
I'm Jordan Griffin, and I'm locked in.
Hey everybody, this is Island Fight CEO Dean Toole, and I am locked in.
I'm Michael Davis, and I'm locked in.
And we are locked in, myself, Max Van Auken, and we have David Van Auken, a.k.a. Dave the Wave. How are you doing, my man?
Cuzzo, I'm doing great. How are you doing, buddy?
Always doing better when we're getting locked in. No matter if the day is great, tremendous, rough day, bad weather, if we're locked in, it's a great day.
That is a great point. Sometimes, life isn't perfect. You can be in the dumps. But hey, just put on the Locked In podcast.
But this one, especially for Fight Bananas, fightbananas.com. Check it out for the best MMA news, fightbananas.com. A lot of good pieces out there from you, Dave. I wrote a couple pieces. So fightbananas.com, the best MMA news. And this episode, locked in with two ends on any podcast platform. Download and subscribe. Straight MMA. Straight MMA. There's so much to talk about, Dave.
That's why. There's so much to talk about. All of our posts. I'm having a cough attack over here. I'm chewing too many bananas.
That's a good one. You played that off pretty well.
I know. No, just there was so much great content out there. The UFC with Jones winning the title, UFC 235, it's like the greatest card ever put together. So many matches are on ESPN now. So many new fights and exciting fights. I can't wait. I'm ready when you are.
UFC 235, you mentioned it, Las Vegas, March 2nd, T-Mobile Arena. There's John Jones versus Anthony Smith reported, Tyron Woodley versus Usman, Ben Askren versus Robbie Lawler, and then Jeremy Stephens versus Zabit, and then Cody Garbrandt. That, not only is it one of the most stacked fight cards, but I am like listing it or labeling it as one of the most legacy-defining fight cards. And I guess I'll start it off here, Dave. When I go down the list, John Jones, arguably the greatest fighter of all time, in my opinion, he is inside the octagon. Every fight he fights from here on out is about the GOAT status. So every fight is a legacy-defining fight for him when you reach that level, that stature. Tyron Woodley, the welterweight division, and we wrote about this, has a history of great champions. Georges St. Pierre, Matt Hughes, and Woodley's made it known he wants to be the greatest welterweight of all time. So after a dominating performance over Darren Till, if he can do that over Usman, then there you go for Tyron Woodley. And then Ben Askren, one of the best fighters, if not the best fighter, it's like him and Fedor, to never fight in the UFC. If he can live up to the hype, live up to what he says, and beats Robbie Lawler, a former UFC champion, who knows what's next? And if Robbie Lawler wins, he's in contention. And then Cody Garbrandt's on the fight card, and Jeremy Stephens versus an up-and-comer in Zabit. Dave, I am blown away. It's legacy-defining. It's a great fight card. What is your take?
Wow, that was a mouthful, but you're absolutely right. Just the main event alone, anytime John Jones is on the card, it's a big fight, legacy, championship, light heavyweight status, GOAT status, and then not even that, the elephant in the room. Let's just call it how it is. Let's see how he does with the drug test, right? Every fight that he passes another drug test really benefits John Jones a lot. It's I know that sounds stupid. Winning the fight is secondary. If he just fights 3-4 more times and goes 2-2 or 3-1, but does not get popped and fights the best of the best, he still probably goes down as the greatest fighter ever. He just needs more fights. With just a clean test. Is that weird of me to say? Is that kind of out of left field?
No, it's not weird, especially because he's his biggest enemy, right? He's never lost inside the octagon besides that disqualification over Matt Hamill, which we all know he was dominating, so we don't count that as a loss. So the only issue there has been with John Jones is outside, and obviously that involves the drug testing. So I think you're right on the money, and think about this. So you just made the statement, let's just say he goes 2-2, but he has clean tests. You said he's probably still the GOAT. So imagine if he has a clean test, which I believe he will, and he defeats all these guys. That's just flat out GOAT with no debates, right?
Oh, yeah. I think he's at that stature already. Who he's went through, his title defenses, how he finishes people, the flair, usually the higher you go in weight, the more recognition or the higher all-time great status you get. So with John Jones being a light heavyweight and doing what he's doing, yeah, he's never lost in the octagon. Let's just call it how it is. He's never lost. The Matt Hamill thing's a joke. And, God, man, they wish they can change it because he should be an undefeated, unbeaten, unmatched champion. So John Jones inside the octagon is the greatest of all time. No one's ever seen a machine like him. His body, his technique, he can finish people standing, the wrestling. He just has the best base. If you had to create, God came to this earth, I want to create an MMA fighter, John Jones, that's it. This is what he's on this planet to do.
Yeah.
So now he fights Anthony Smith for the light heavyweight championship in the main event of 235, which is so stacked. There's even a couple other fights that are on that card that we haven't even talked about. Like the 6th, 7th, 8th fight is amazing. But anyways, Max, do you want to tell the Anthony Smith story, the backstory that we got today? Are we allowed to say that on this podcast?
We'll leave a couple details out, but the gist is, but also for the record, it could be a millennial term. So for those that don't know, the GOAT is the greatest of all time. So just to explain it, any first-time listeners or people who've never heard that expression, you probably have if you follow basketball and NFL, but in case you haven't, we're not calling these people GOATs, literally. We're saying they're the greatest of all time. But anyway, but yeah, so Anthony Smith, our guy from Pete White Boxing and MMA, Anderson Hutchinson, almost was not in an altercation with him, but was coaching a fighter that was opposing him. And basically he was giving Anderson a tough time and calling him out and just really making a big scene out of it.
That. That's not even to get into crazy details.
Yeah.
But he wasn't a good person, right? There's you wake up in the morning, we both put our pants on the same way, and you make a left to become a good person, or you make a right and you're a bad person, or just, having a bad day, all that stuff. I guess Anthony Smith that day went right. He was a bad person, not a good dude. So I'm ready for John Jones to whoop that man's ass. Can I say that? Am I allowed? Is this legal to say that? I cannot wait. I'm 100% rooting for John Jones. I want him to wreck this man. So I'm just, I can't wait. I want to finish. I want a first round finish. And do you think it's good or bad for John Jones, the quick turnaround? He's done this a couple times in his career when I feel like he strikes when the iron's hot. His name is hot right now. He's young. He's healthy. He really didn't get hurt at all by Gus. He barely got touched. So he just fought December 29th. He's already back March 25th. Cuzzo, do you think that's a good idea for John or a bad idea?
I think it's a tremendous idea because, for one, you hit on right on the money because he didn't receive a lot of damage. The way he fights is very strategic, is very cerebral, and he goes in there with a game plan that allows him to utilize his advantages over his opponent's disadvantages. He's not just going to go out there and bang and receive a lot of damage. So, number one, he's healthy. Number two, we've been criticizing him because he's been inactive and he's been failing these drug tests. So the biggest criticism, what's the one way to fix it? Be active and pass drug tests. Like you said, it's almost the fight before the fight. If he can be active, pass these drug tests, and do what he normally does inside the octagon, which is win, it's a win-win and 2 win columns for me. I think it's tremendous.
Okay. I kind of am in agreement. Let's go to the co-main event. You kind of touched on that too. Woodley versus Usman. Gosh, I love it. There's always some fights. Last year, in the last 6 months, it was to me, was the Brian Ortega versus Max Holloway. I just like that fight so much more than other people. I can't put my finger on it. This is that fight so far, and this probably for, I know we got Dillashaw, Cejudo, we got Cain versus Francis. We got a lot of big fights coming. We even got the main event, John Jones versus Anthony Smith. I like this fight even more. I think Woodley's the most underrated champion out of everyone in the UFC. And I think this is the fight. I can't wait. I think they nailed it. I like Colby Covington, but this is the fight to make. I don't know what's going on. It's a weird dance. He's saying the UFC lied to him. There's always drama around Covington and matchups. So these two guys want to fight. Let's make it happen.
No, I like this fight, not only because it's the elite versus the elite, but like you said, if Woodley wins, it's cementing to his legacy and the argument to be one of the greatest welterweight champions of all time, where you go Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, and then Tyron Woodley. So for him, that's why I think it's such a legacy-defining fight, but on top of that, it's a gateway and more of a build-up to fight Colby Covington. We already know there's feud. They've already exchanged words multiple times. They're not big fans of each other, to say the least. So it kind of builds that fight up a little bit more. And then Tyron Woodley's teammate, all out of Rufus Sport, Ben Askren, is fighting underneath him. So the welterweight division has so many different variables to it, and it's just so interesting to see it play out. And what if it gets to the point where Ben Askren beats everybody he needs to beat? Tyron Woodley keeps defending his belt. I don't think they'll ever fight each other, and I don't think Ben Askren can necessarily make 155, and he seems pretty keen on making 165. So there's so many things that can play out. It's extremely interesting in the welterweight division.
Yeah, 100%. Rufus Sport is definitely trying to dominate that welterweight division. For me, I don't think that fight happens. I think there's so many other fighters, Lawler, there's a Diaz, there's Covington. There's so many more. I guess I'm drawing a blank on a couple of those top tier, but there's so many great welterweight fighters. I think they can spin around the rosy and not fight each other. I don't think Askren and Woodley will fight each other. To me, Askren can even move up to middleweight and do a big mega fight. Just throwing out a name right here. How about him versus Chris Weidman? Big money fight. Boom. Then I think he can go down. Him versus Connor, 155. He'll make that weight for 155, and that'd be the biggest fight of the summer. So I think Askren, they can move around, especially if Woodley keeps the strap. But let's just call it now. Usman, undefeated in the welterweight division. If he wins the championship, I think Askren gets that title shot right away, because I think the UFC knows the Askren won't go after Woodley. So let's see if Askren can become a championship or at least a number one contender. You know what I mean? So there's so many things. You're right with the welterweights.
Robbie could even win. Robbie could win and get the title shot. You never know.
Robbie could win. I'm so happy you said that. I'm a diehard Robbie Lawler fan. I've met him 2 years ago. Unbelievable, gracious guy in the octagon. I just love his style. I love his style. Straightforward. Throwing hands the whole time, doesn't stop for 25 minutes. Because Robbie Lawler only fights in heavy, main events and title fights. So he fights for 25 minutes. He's a maniac. I don't think people are giving Robbie Lawler enough respect in this fight versus Askren. Askren's the new toy. He's the shiny new Christmas toy. So people are all excited, but Lawler could go bananas on Askren.
Yeah, and of course Cody Garbrandt is rumored to be on this card as well, but the interesting fight for me is Zabit versus Jeremy Stephens, because Zabit is this up-and-comer who everybody's scared to fight. He's just a technician. He's great on the ground game, technical on the feet. But Jeremy Stephens, kind of like back to your point, Zabit seems to be the new shiny toy, but Jeremy Stephens is the guy who's been in these wars, knockout power in both hands. He's a wrestler. He's gritty. He's not scared of anybody. So stylistically, this is a true test for Zabit. And if Jeremy Stephens wins, that shoots him right back up the ranks. And then if Zabit wins, this truly proves that he's a legitimate contender in that division.
Yeah, 100% agree. In this one, I'm going to go with that new shiny toy. I think Zabit is that good. Zabit, just every time I watch him, he just impresses me more and more. I think he takes care of Stephens. I think Stephens is at the end of his career, especially in UFC. I think we'll see him in another fight in the organization in 2019. And then I don't want to leave this fight if you don't want to, but another fight, because this is that fight I was telling you about. I couldn't, and it finally popped in my head. Holly Holm versus Aspen Ladd. So if Holly Holm, this could be the Amanda Nunes is next opponent in this fight. OSP is on this card. Mickey Gall versus Diego Sanchez. So this card is stacked. UFC 235.
Yeah, that fight card is ridiculous. And then you also have, before this fight card, which is March 2nd, UFC 235 Las Vegas, we have Fight Night 143, January 19th, Barclays Center, Brooklyn, New York. Henry Cejudo versus TJ Dillashaw, the champ versus the champ. And then you have Greg Hardy, who was supposed to be on Island Fights 51, as the co-main event versus Alan Crowder, who's 7-3. Now, that is a very interesting fight because we'll dive into it now, I guess. The champ. It's always interesting to see two champions fight each other. And in my opinion, TJ Dillashaw is one of the most underrated champions in the fight game. And to fight Cejudo, who just has his biggest high in the sport and his career, he just defeated Demetrius Johnson, who some think is the greatest of all time. And I think TJ Dillashaw, for him, this fight will cement him as not only a champ, but a guy who's a legitimate pound-for-pound great in the sport.
Wow. First of all, this fight, 4 letters. ESPN. Who would have thought this, Cuzzo? You and I watching MMA, watching UFC in the dark ages, they used to call it, right? People used to call it barbaric, cave-like, and we would get the pay-per-view, and that's it. And then they went to Fox, which is, I thought, the craziest deal, and I wish they were still on Fox, if I could be just brutally honest. I'm a Fox guy. But we all know ESPN, when you just think of them with sports and SportsCenter and Stuart Scott and all the shows, Stephen A. Smith, you think of sports, you think of ESPN. Because Fox has The Simpsons, Fox has movies. You think of ESPN, you think of sports. And for the UFC to be on ESPN is just gigantic. It really is. It's just one of these, another glass ceiling that Dana White and the UFC is just running right past. They're not breaking through it anymore. They're just running past it. I'm just so excited. But okay, talk about the fight itself. Yeah, TJ Dillashaw. Love TJ Dillashaw. Top 5, top 8 favorite fighter in the game. I think the Henry Cejudo win over Demetrius Johnson reminds me of a lot of Matt Serra. Henry can go down as a cool guy, almost an all-time great, but he beat GSP. Henry beat DJ. It was a shocking upset. I don't think he ever wins a big time fight again. I really don't. I think Dillashaw is a whole nother level above him. And if he makes weight and he makes weight healthy, I think this is, I don't want to say it in a weird, I think it's easy. I think he just kind of goes through him. I don't know if there's a stoppage sometimes in a 5-round fight, especially a championship fight. A guy can just totally smash a guy and just almost not get stopped, especially with that light of punches. I think Dillashaw destroys him. And the co-main event, just a real quick one, I think Greg Hardy gets the win as well. I think Greg Hardy's on the way up to heavyweight rankings.
I'm going to disagree with you real quick. So this is obviously for the flyweight title, and the question in that division seems to be a big one. So, okay, we're talking about TJ Dillashaw versus Henry Cejudo. I'm going to disagree with the premise that it's almost like Matt Serra's victory over George St. Pierre was Henry Cejudo's over Demetrius Johnson. And I thought Demetrius Johnson won that fight. But to Henry's credit, not only is he a decorated wrestler, an Olympian, but it was a 5-round war. It was a strategic war, and one that he implemented his game plan over. Matt Serra, and I love Matt Serra, one of the funniest guys on earth. But what he did was more of a one-punch knockout over Matt Serra, over George St. Pierre, not a 5-round war. So I think Henry had to prove himself more, and he really had to show his talent. He had to overcome adversity, and he had to go in the championship rounds, and he was fighting in all elements of the fight instead of just one quick flurry and win.
I see what you did there, and I can't disagree with it. It's a really laid-out formula point. You get brownie points. You really do. But I guess the only analogy that came to me right on the top of the head was like the Philadelphia Eagles beating the Patriots. They didn't do it on a fluke, Hail Mary. They outplayed in that whole game. But I think Philadelphia is coming back to earth. I don't think New England's back in it again. They're going to win championships. To me, New England is like a Dillashaw.
That's a better one.
And Anderson Silva. I think the Eagles, they outplayed him the whole game. They did. They played great. They beat him. But I don't think Henry Cejudo ever plays that great again. I don't think he ever wins the Super Bowl again. And I think that's more my point.
I like that. I like that comparison better. That's a good analogy with the Eagles and the Patriots. That makes more sense in my opinion.
Hey, cousin, that's why I get paid the big bucks.
Dave, we also, and I believe Greg Hardy, by the way, is an emerging star, so I'm with you on that one. We also have February 17th on ESPN. Cain Velasquez versus Francis Ngannou. The last fight Cain Velasquez had was UFC 200. He beat Travis Brown. And then obviously Francis Ngannou just knocked out Curtis Blades on UFC Fight Night, November 24th. So he's obviously a more active fighter, or he fought frequently. Cain Velasquez, Dave, I've told you this from the very beginning, even speaking to Coach Javier from AKA. I think he's the greatest heavyweight in all time. Prime Cain is like what all fighters are from AKA. You look at Duran, you look at Daniel Cormier, you look at Habib. They all overwhelm you with their pressure, their stamina, their boxing, their wrestling, and they implement their game plan over you, and they all have that mindset of, I'm not quitting and I'm going to break you. And to me, Cain Velasquez was the greatest heavyweight of all time, so it's so great to see him come back in the octagon, and I really want to see if he can do this, because Francis Ngannou, in my opinion, for both fighters, I think this is the perfect fight, because he's fighting somebody who has questionable wrestling in Ngannou, that's how Stipe beat him, and stamina. But for Francis Ngannou, he's like, hey, Cain Velasquez hasn't fought since UFC 200. I have knockout power. I know he wants to take me down. I'm ready to prove I could beat this wrestler. So I think this is perfect stylistic matchup, wrestler versus striker for both fighters. I can't wait to see how this one plays out.
Okay, I'm going to give you my prediction and then toot the locked-in horn. My prediction, Cain Velasquez wins. I agree with you. Okay, Locked In Sports Podcasts have been around almost 2 years, Max. And I wish a couple episodes ago that when this fight broke, everyone was like, oh my gosh, Cain Velasquez is back. This is amazing. Me and Max were like, yeah, no, we knew he was coming back. We talked to Coach Javier. Javier told us face to the phone. He goes, he's ready. They're waiting for a fight. They're ready. I think the heavyweight division with DC is a little scramble. They don't know if Brock is fighting or not. I think they were waiting for this fight to put on ESPN. Why make Cain's return, who you can argue and have a really, really good, strong argument that he's the greatest heavyweight in the history of the UFC. So why make his return the third fight on a UFC? Make him the main event on the second ever ESPN card, which they are doing. So to me, this is brilliant. I just love that we kind of in a way got this knowledge, talking to Javier, locked in, over 140 episodes, 50 interviews, events galore. If you ain't locked in, you are officially locked out. That's all I can say, Max. That's it. I'm tooting our horn. Is that okay?
Of course it's okay, but for those who are like, okay, you know what? I don't want to get locked out, Dave. How do I get locked in? Any podcast platform, locked in with two N's, locked in, there's two separate words, two N's. Download and subscribe to Locked In on any podcast platform. Dave and I talk about basketball. We talk about football. We talk about MMA, The Avengers, Aquaman. You name it, we talk about it. So make sure you check it out. Locked In with two N's. And also, this episode is on fightbananas.com with all the best MMA news. Strictly MMA, combat sports, fightbananas.com. But on that note, Dave, may I move on to the next card?
Oh, no, just real quick before that, it was funny. One of someone came to me. They're like, hey, Max, Dave, this is awesome. I love your show. I didn't know that it was on iHeartRadio. So I guess we got to tell people, a lot of people have the app, iHeartRadio app. If you write in the search bar, if you put in Locked In with two N's, we're on there. We're on the iHeartRadio app. We're on any app, guys. Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or of course iHeartRadio. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that. And then just go back through our log. We have over 150, 60 shows. Javier Mendez, if you want to hear our great interview with him right before Duran won the main event of that Golden Boy Promotions event, we talked to him. So definitely get locked in. Michael Davis, Beast Boy's on there. There's plenty. We're going bananas right now. Everyone download and subscribe the Locked In podcast.
There you go. Couldn't have said it better myself, but now we have Derrick Lewis versus Junior Dos Santos, ESPN 4, main event, Wichita, Kansas, March 9th. Your initial take, Dave. The floor is yours.
Okay, we talked about this off air. And I'm still sticking to my gut. I got Derrick Lewis. There's something about he has knockout power we've seen in the first minute or in the last 10 seconds of a fight. And I kind of like that. I feel like he's never out of it. JDS to me is just not who JDS used to be. Junior Dos Santos in his prime, he's the one that knocked out Cain and became heavyweight champion of the world. That was 7-8 years ago now. So I think Derrick Lewis fought DC well, was on a great winning streak. His last loss before that was Mark Hunt around 2.5, 3 years ago. So there's no shame to losing to DC. I think Derrick Lewis gets back on the right track and he gets the W.
This is a tough one. I'm not really giving my predictions just yet. I have them in my mind. I'll probably tweet them later, right before the fight. But as far as just the entertainment value, this has Fight of the Night written all over, and I guarantee you somebody's getting knocked out because both fighters, again, have something to prove. And I think that's what UFC's doing a really good job on as far as going into the new year, 2019, ESPN. Every fight that we've mentioned has some type of significant value, and someone can say, well, isn't that what they always do? And yes, they do, but it seems like it's just a little bit more already. Just starting off the year, having these all-time greats come back into the sport, having these up-and-comers back in, it's really something incredible and remarkable. And for this fight, like you just said, Derrick Lewis just lost to the former champ, the current heavyweight champion, Daniel Cormier. And then you have Junior Dos Santos, who is the former heavyweight champion, who's fought Stipe, who's fought Cain, who has the resume. So I would say it's the old guard, new guard, but they're all going towards the same goal. So when you have the same goal in your mind, I don't know if I'm going to say old guard, new guard, because title contention is certainly in both people's windshield. Like they both can see that at the end of the tunnel, that title. Typically when you say old guard, you're thinking he's just fighting, he's staying around. But with both of them having title aspirations, I see so much on the line for both. I'm not counting out either or, but I do know it has Fight of the Night written all over it.
Wow, okay. So a little bit on the fence there, Max. A little bit on the fence.
Yeah, it's well, with heavyweights, it's just so hard because they hit so damn hard. They can knock. Junior Dos Santos may be the better fighter, but Derrick Lewis just knocks him out that night because he just has a brick for a hand, or vice versa. So it's so hard with heavyweights.
100% agree. Yeah, you never know, and you could JDS could be winning the first 14 minutes and 50 seconds of this fight,
right?
And then Derrick Lewis gets him. So yeah, I agree with you. And one thing I think that's so cool, and we'll do a whole nother Fight Bananas podcast on this. We just talked about 14 great fights. I'm talking about like fights I'm really excited about. Of course, the one I said earlier, I'm excited the most for Woodley, Usman, and there's just so much. We didn't even mention UFC 234, which is in front of UFC 235, which is the double main event of the middleweights, with Whitaker and Gastelum, and then our co-main event, the Style Bender versus Anderson, maybe the GOAT Spider Silva. This is incredible. We'll do a whole show on it. I don't want to get in it. I just want the fans to hear how much MMA fights are coming. ESPN, pay-per-views, fight nights. There's so much going on. There's so much going on locally. Definitely support your local fighters, guys. They are the future UFC fighters. We got so much going on. There's island fights coming up, more combat nights. There's Clash of the Titans 3 in Orlando, Florida, February. Cuzzo, I'm running out of steam. I got to eat more bananas so I get more energy. I'm running out.
I will say, okay, well, we also have Rose Namajunas versus Jessica, UFC 237 in Brazil in May. But beyond that, I want to say, I thought about it today. So I'm driving back from Orlando, Florida, and I'm like, what's like the one thing that separates the UFC? And I'm talking to Anderson. He's in the car with me. And it's like every fight for a fighter is their Super Bowl. Like, well, you could say the Super Bowl is probably the title. So let's just say like a playoff game. With basketball, you have 82 games in a regular season. With football, you have a couple games in the season, and then you have the playoffs, hockey. But with UFC, every fight, you're on the verge of maybe getting cut, or you may be on the verge of climbing up the ranks. It's really a playoff type of atmosphere when it comes to fighters. And I know you have your playoff theory, but just on the regular basis, every fight for these people is their lives. It's their occupation. It's their passion. They drag their fight camp into this. It's like their Super Bowl every single fight. And like, I think that's what really separates the UFC from any other sport. Like, I'm not saying it's overthrown the NFL by any means, but as far as just raw substance and emotion and so much on the line every fight, that's why you get such passionate personalities and so many different people from around the world all trying to get that one title. And that one fight can determine what happens. Isn't that crazy?
Because that is crazy. This is such a good point, idea, theory. We should do a whole nother show on this. We really could. And to kind of double down on it, it's not even so they fight, and it's an absolute playoff game. They move up, or you can get cut, just like you said. But it's not even if you win; it's how you win. I remember still to this day, and I know you will too. I know you're gonna love this. Forrest Griffin beat Shogun Rua. Wow, it was awesome. But how he did it? He was losing the whole fight. Remember, he gets the choke in. He's bleeding. He gets the win with maybe less than 10 seconds, and he runs up with his hands up. He wasn't even in the top 3 title contention, but right after that, I remember turning to my friends and be like, he's going to fight for the title next. Like, that was such a biblical image, such a great, spectacular finish. You went all in. So it's not even if you win a game. In football, the Chargers stunk in the fourth quarter and let Baltimore in, but we're not talking about it. They won, they moved on. That's all you care about is if you win. It's not like that in MMA and especially the UFC. You have to win almost in spectacular fashion. It's unbelievable. Sugar Rashad Evans with that unbelievable knockout, then he gets the title shot. It really is an incredible idea, theory, something that we could talk about for hours. Man, that might be a ride to Pensacola, Florida, and have a 2-hour podcast about.
To Island Fights. Check it out. Island Fights 52. Dean Toole, the man himself, the promoter of Island Fights, always putting on great shows. But Dave, to a great episode. So much MMA, so much good news. FightBananas.com. Locked in with 2 N's. Do you have any last words, my friend, my cousin, my co-host?
Definitely, buddy. Yeah, Jack. Check out FightBananas.com. We're going to have a lot of fighters on there. We're going to ask them 5 questions. That's kind of being a new thing we're going to start doing. Felicia Spencer, the Invicta featherweight champion, she was just on it. We're going to get more fighters on soon. We're going to ask them just 5 questions, and they're going to give us their honest, truth answers, and we're going to tell you, the folks, the world. I can't wait to get more fighters on it. One guy I'm interested to do it with is Stephen Mowry. He's just a funny guy. Every time he's been on our show, he cracks us up. He had that amazing Antonio Brown story. So maybe, Max, maybe you and I can work on getting Stephen Mowry to give us 5 questions.
That sounds terrific. I'm in. I'm locked in.
All right. Whoa, hey, there you go. Big bucks, Max, coming on board.
But like always,
stay
locked in.